Welcome to Uncultured Christianity, episode 2. And I want to share this slide. This is an invitation for correspondence. Basically, this is an invitation to talk. If there's anyone that wants to talk about what I will be sharing on this podcast, whether they agree or disagree, if they want to bring correction, if they want to have discussions, if they want to have debates, I want to hear from you. Leave comments. You can PM me, private message me on the Facebook page, unCULTured Christianity. I encourage you to like and subscribe if these podcasts are benefiting you, if they're helping you grow, helping you be strengthened and edified and exhorted. Like and subscribe, share this. And of course, message me if you want to talk. I'm interested in talking. I'm not just going to sit here and do these podcasts without being open to responding to anyone that wants to talk about this stuff. Because some of this stuff, I know a lot of this stuff that I'm going to be sharing throughout these podcasts, not only in this season, but I'm planning on doing other seasons addressing concerns within the Christian culture, the church culture of today. And I know I'm going to have a lot of people that disagree with me. And, my goal is to get people to dive into the Word of God, dive into this, and see what Scripture tells us to do, how Scripture tells us to conduct ourselves as ministers, as elders, as deacons, as pastors, whatever you may be within a church. If you're a volunteer, or if you're just simply attending a local congregation, this is a call for people to go and make disciples. And if they want to do that within the facets of attending a local church, that's great, that's fine. But what I encourage anyone that is attending a local congregation, don't just go to church, go with conviction. And hopefully you're a part of a congregation that has an emphasis on going and making disciples. And I know they're out there. There are some, and maybe I'll do an episode where I share and basically boast on some of the churches that are, there's some here locally. There's some that I know around the country that are doing what they should be doing. They're going and making disciples, and they're structured around outreach, and they're not centralized as some kind of strict cultural hierarchy. So what I want to do today, in episode 2, is I want to tell you 2 stories. The title of this podcast is 2 times that I had to walk away from church plans. Okay, I think that's how I worded it. 2 times that I had to walk away from church plans. Okay. 2020, starting in 2020. I'm going to tell you about the first one. Okay. My family and I were not participating in a local congregation for a couple of years. Not for any negative reason. We just had some very busy years. My mom passed away, and I had to deal with settling her estate. I also had to rebuild a business that I had here in the Tampa Bay area. And get that back up and running, and also get it functioning better. And also I helped my brother. My brother had he was part of the same company we were franchising with. We had 2 different companies. I had one and he had one, and we were 2 separate contractors, but I wanted to help him build up his business. So that took about, I'm going to say 2 or 3 years. And around 2019, we were settling down. We had moved into this house that we are in right now, and things were settling down. Business was going good, and I really felt it's time, to get back into ministry. I had been in ministry before. I was a lay minister for a couple of years over in the Palm Coast area. I was helping a pastor friend of mine with his church, and between me stepping down from that for good reason, I took a job as a corrections officer into the time frame that I'm mentioning right now, 2020. It was about 5 years. So there was a 5-year break, and we were just really feeling a leading to get back into ministry. So I want to talk to you, give you a little narrative about a church plant in Pasco. Okay, and what this was basically a result of a mega church in that area, in the east north Pasco area. Is a big church, probably the biggest church in Pasco County. This mega church had a very good pastor. The founding pastor was a very good pastor, from what I've been told. And I guess he retired, and they installed a new pastor to replace him. And this new pastor really just revamped everything. And with that revamping within this mega church, he fired a lot of people. A lot of people were fired. A lot of people were displaced, and a lot of people that were attending that megachurch for a long time were displeased with this new pastor and how he was basically running things. It definitely was a hierarchical structure. He was very autocratic, and I've heard stories about this fella out there, that the way he's running his church, and just not good. I'll tell you this: if anyone is in this area, and I do this, people ask me, "Hey, Kevin, can you tell me about a good church in the area?" Or they'll tell me, "Hey, I'm looking at this church, and I have no problem, this church, that church. I have no problem warning them if I believe that church is harmful." Okay, and that's not anything I'm going to broadcast, but that's just a personal conversation, primarily on the phone. And that's one church out there that I would steer people away from. Okay, based on the stuff that I've heard from dozens of people have been negatively affected by that church culture, the way that new pastor just sort of firing people, really good people, by the way, too. Good. Some pastors, they were pastors serving there. Good pastors were fired. Good volunteers, good leaders were let go. And then he installed his favorites. He came with his group, and they basically restructured. And I feel that megachurch pastor, that new pastor that replaced the founding pastor, was just shoring up his structure and the framework of his leadership, of his control over that congregation. And it's been successful because he's still out there very much in control of what's going on with that mega church. So what that caused was a schism, a split. Maybe 150, 200 people walked away, and they were looking for a church. And at the same time, there was a young pastor that was serving in the east regions of Pasco County. And this young man has felt a calling to launch a church in West Pasco since he was 18 years old. So I can't doubt that. I really think that is a genuine calling of the Lord for this young pastor to launch a church out there. So a connection was made between this group of people that left the mega church and this young pastor, and they met, had some dinners and whatnot. I was at some of those dinners because I heard what was going on, and actually my cousin is one of the primary pioneers of this new church plant that I tried to be a part of in 2020. So I figured, let me jump on board. Went to some of those dinners where we talked to this young pastor, so my family and I decided to jump on board and see if we can participate in this church launch in the West Pasco area. So there was a good amount of funding that was donated, from what I heard. A good amount of money that was that was saved up by some of the other pioneers of this new church plant out there. And then there was the backing of, I believe, a denomination, and I think the General Baptists were backing this up. So there was definitely a good jumping point. It's what any pioneering pastor would dream of as far as launching a church. When you have about 100 people that are ready to just jump on board with you, ready to volunteer and whatnot, and then there's money there. There's good support from the church that this young pastor was serving at as a youth leader. Very good. And that church is a good church out there. in this, I think it's in Spring Hill in that area, or no, I'm sorry, Brooksville, I think. Good church out there in Brooksville. There's some good ones out there, and I have no problem saying there's good church and there's some bad ones. Okay, in this church launch, as far as the content or the heart behind it was definitely good, but you know, I just, there was some things I disagreed with. The functionality of it, you know, the attractional side to it, you know, it centered around finding a location, okay, pretty decent sized location that can fit about 500 people, and there was a lot of resources and funding put into the marketing of this church plant, and as the months went by, I was concerned about that, you know, and, you know, you can have concerns about theology, but you can have concerns about functionality also. I had absolutely no concerns about the theology behind this young man that, you know, planted this church out there. And I still think he's spot. He's great. I would say he's a church now, 5 or 6 years. I would send people to his church, that church. It's a little centralized for my taste, but he is preaching the gospel out there, and I'll get into some of the changes that happened with that church plant. But again, I had some concerns, and at the time in 2020, before COVID, this really was being built around the young pastor. Every picture you saw on Facebook, every marketing picture most of it was him, and then people coming, smiling, families holding hands. There were people holding up signs, "You're welcome here." A lot of that attractional marketing that goes into getting people to come to your church. And I just was having a hard time with that. Again, I'm looking at my notes, being really built around that young pastor, you know, and really, I could say this, and even now, the main goal of this church plant is to get people to show up. They do outreach, but the main motive, the main engine, if you will, behind this church plant is getting people to show up, really marketing to already saved Christians. Okay. And I struggle with this, you know, and I made my opinions known, and really I was met with just really no response. It was, they weren't interested in talking to me about that. And I wasn't trying to push like, hey, just completely revamp everything, but do both. Be attractional and be incarnate at the same time. I'm going to get into that. The difference between an attractional model church and an incarnate model church. And I believe there's room for both, but I think the first one should be the incarnate model. That's what they should be doing first. And then the attractional model, within the balance of being incarnate, they should run hand in hand, and they should harmonize really well. But again, on a positive note, there has been changes at this local congregation out there in Pasco. They struggled, and I think the struggling going through the beginnings of COVID and all the shutdowns, they had to move their location like 5 times, and every single time they moved their location, they'd lose the group that they attracted, you know. And my brother would talk to my cousin about it. My cousin was really one of the pioneers. He's the church administrator over there. Would tell him like, hey, you really didn't have those people, you know. And just a lot of resources and funding would go into relaunching, doing grand openings, engaging community events, barbecues, and stuff like that. And really, the main function was attracting other Christians that are already saved to come. You know, they do outreach. I'm very happy to hear that they do now. Again, going through those tough times, going through having to basically go back to the drawing board over and over and over again because of COVID, built character in them. And one thing I appreciate about what happened is when they dwindled down to 20 people, because let me remind you, they started out with over 100, and their opening service that they did in 2020 had 500 people show up. Again, that is what a dream come true for a pioneering pastor nowadays. Have 500 people show up to your first service, and full full on production with the worship team and all that stuff. It was all these volunteers and whatnot, and to go from that to losing a location, and I've heard some of the stories from my cousin that they were just bad deals with some of these facilities that they were trying to rent from, and just there was some spin narrative, there was some promises that weren't kept with said facilities. I think some of them were actually already existing churches that had spaces of time to use their campuses and their sanctuaries. But one thing I said, let me go back. One thing I appreciate about them is I recently visited them, and the humility that I now see in the young pastor and his team. And one of the things they told me is that my cousin told me that when there was only 20 people showing up, they served those 20 people like they were 200 people. And then they basically, all the people that started out with them that spun off from that mega church disappeared. They literally, the only ones left are my cousin and his family and the pastor and his family with a whole new batch. And they're back up to about 500 people. In my opinion, for me, it's a little too attractional, too cultured, but I would send people there based on the fact that he's preaching the gospel, and he does a good job. He's a very good preacher. I've watched him preach, and I've learned, and I've told him. We've had phone conversations on the phone. I've asked him about church structure and whatnot when I was trying to relaunch Cornerstone, and got some advice from him. And he came out with my cousin, looked at our facility, prayed with me, and he told me some of his stories and whatnot. And one of the things he told me that I was very pleased about is that he trained up pastors and sent them out. That's cool. So I've seen a lot of growth there. So another church plant that I had to walk away from was a Clearwater church plant, about a year ago. So 5 years later, a young pastor got a hold of me, contacted me from out of state. We met up, we spoke over the phone several times and compared our visions and whatnot. And at the time, Cornerstone, we were just burning out. It was like just my family and another family showing up on Sunday. We were trying to facilitate services with worship, and we just couldn't do it. I was trying to get everyone to just do a gathering style, and I was met with disagreement. So I just felt like, well, let me humble myself, and this is what the people that are there are asking for. I'm going to serve them in that facet. But anyway, we were really tired, just burning out, and really the high point of our weekly function was our Wednesday night Bible study, where we had maybe 10 to 15 people showing up and just logging on the line. So basically it was a good time. I felt it was a good time to see if I could work with someone, because we had this big facility that could fit 300 people in it, and no one's showing up. So at that point, I'm like, look, even if it doesn't work out with this new church plant that's coming to Clearwater, we'll just give them the sanctuary, because we're pretty much doing everything on Wednesday night anyway. So the board at my church met with this young pastor by phone a couple times, and just long story short, it didn't work out. There was disagreements, and I gotta say, the one ingredient that was lacking on both sides, because I disagree with how both sides handled the trying to resolve a merger, and then it became like, well, let's just use your facility. There was definitely a lack of humility on both sides. Okay, I love the board that I worked for at Cornerstone, but there was some lack of humility there, and also definitely with this new young and up and coming pastor that was coming to the area, there was just a lack of humility there. Anyway, my family tried to work with this young pastor. Okay, and again, just like the Pasco plant, the main efforts of this new church was on attracting other Christians to show up. Okay. It also was evident that it's structured around a senior pastor model. Okay. Very hierarchical. Can't question that hierarchy. Okay. Didn't like that. Didn't really notice that until I had to walk away. I had one last conversation. And I told this young guy, I'm like, look, you guys have a hierarchy. And my family have a conviction that we will never subject ourselves under a strict autocratic hierarchy where one person's making all the decisions. Decisions for finances, decisions for who's in position and all that stuff, okay? And, they had 100 people show up to their first service, and really these people came from two megachurches. One of them being the one that I mentioned in Pasco. There was some more leftovers that were spinning off from that church because they just weren't happy with how that new pastor that was installed in 2020 was running that church. So you had to spin off from that, and then another church in Dunedin, not too far from where Cornerstone was, and there was people spinning off of that mega church. So, I kept hearing this phrase constantly: be excited, be excited, be excited. And I couldn't find myself being excited over Christians that are just transplanting from other churches. I couldn't be excited over that. I even asked, I said, well, what if because I love street evangelism. I love going and ministering on the streets. And I'm like, can I go and bring some homeless people in here? And I was actually told no. Okay. Or no, and not at this time. But let me tell you what would have excited me is instead of 100 already saved Christians showing up, 2 or 3 lost people walked in the door. That's what would excite me. When we did the Witnesses Now for Jesus conferences here in the Clearwater Dunedin area, we had 1 or 2 people show up that we believe are Jehovah's Witnesses, and we were excited. We were excited. That excited us. We had people that were wanting to come out of the Jehovah's Witness religion cult, watching our live stream while we were doing the conference, and then contacting us. That's exciting, even though there's just 1 or 2 of them. Okay, and we put great effort into this conference. I had speakers coming from all over the country, apologists and former JWs to come to that. But we were excited over the one, and that was our motto. If we can reach only one, it was all worth it. I even asked the young pastor that launched this church in the Clearwater area a year ago, would you continue to facilitate a service if only 3 people show up, or would you go, you know what, guys, let's pack it up and let's try in a month or so? And I was told, yeah, let's pack up. Okay. So, yeah, I found myself not being able to work with that church plant. And, I'm sure, what would be said from that particular pastor is that we walked away because my wife was not able to be a part of the worship team at the get-go. And yes, that's part of it, because if someone has a verified, genuine witness gift, they should be able to use it. And that's one of the problems I see with strict autocratic hierarchies, is that you only have a select few that fit in the centralized clique that can use their gifts, and the rest of the people are just expected to attend and just show up. And what I see that is as basically a stagnation of Christians that have gifts and should be using them. Okay. There were other things that transpired. There was some stories that were, or some narratives that were told differently each time the narrative was told. I'm not going to get into details with that, And you know what? The young pastor may watch this and have a tantrum, and he may be thinking about sending me a cease and desist letter, like the megachurch pastor that he's a clone of from Arizona. Just saying. But you know what? 2 things. I'm not naming names, and my family's connected to a lot of lawyers. So look, if you want to talk, get a hold of me. Let's have a reasonable conversation. You want to ignore me? Ignore me. That's great. Ignore me. Okay. You want to roll? We'll roll. Okay. My main concern is getting God's people to a position, a posture of going. And that could mean that they're attending a local congregation, but as long as that doesn't get away with them going and making disciples, as long as that doesn't get away with them using their gifts that God's given them, then that's great. That's what it's about. So, Matthew 28:19, go ye, therefore teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all the things which I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even to the end of age. We got the Great Commission. And that's what we need to do. We need to be making disciples. So I want to share something with you guys that are watching this podcast. I want to show you an illustration, a demonstration of the difference between an attractional model versus the incarnate model. And again, you want to talk, let's talk. If you want to roll, let's roll. This podcast is not too big right now, so it might not happen, but I'm willing to have a discussion. That's what this disclaimer is about. And again, anytime I show material, which I will in future podcasts, there's this disclaimer, and those I have rights to do so for educational purposes. Okay, so let me give you guys an illustration of how people, so this is why churches are launched the way they are nowadays. So we're going to talk about how someone in today's culture finds a church. What happens is it starts with the individual themselves. The person is like, okay, it's what fits me. What do I find relevant? What is going to be convenient for me? Service times. What kind of worship do I like? What kind of preaching do I like? Stuff like that. Is there something for the kids? Whatever it may be. But anyway, that person, they'll go online or they'll see an advertisement and they'll find a church. And they start going to that church. But inevitably what happens is they don't like something, and it's very fragile, by the way. I've noticed this with Cornerstone. It is very easy for people to not want to attend and be a part of your local congregation. I actually coined the phrase out here in Dunedin, if you don't want to turn right into my parking lot, you'll just turn left into another church's parking lot. It's so easy because, and especially in this county, there are just churches everywhere, hundreds of them. Okay. So they'll get upset about something, they won't like something, they'll just boogie on over to another church. Okay. And because of this, they're really, most of the time they respond to commercial marketing. Right? There are sometimes they're invited by someone they know that attends that other church, but most of the time it's responding to commercial marketing. And because of this, this is how it's been really for the past 50 years. This is how church going has been happening. Okay. And that has shaped the church launching culture. How pastors plant a church in today's church, most of them, not all of them, most of them. It starts with the pastor. They start making some phone calls. They start reaching out to friends, and they get a team. They start sharing their vision, and the vision could be good. Like I said before, I'm going to do videos on this. The content of what you're saying could be good, but the content of what you're doing could be questionable. They both, conduct and content, have to be good. Okay. So pastor going to have a great vision, a great purpose, and they get a team together. And the first thing they do usually is they find some kind of meeting place. A lot of times they rent from spaces from existing churches that have the availability. Sometimes if they have the resources, they'll get a storefront, whatever the case may be. But the whole premise, if they want to attract people to come to this, they need something that people are going to find convenient and relevant, and it's going to make them comfortable. They're going to want to come. Okay. And the next thing they do is they do a launch day and they market. They do marketing. During COVID, 2020, 2021, my wife and I would notice a new church launch in Pinellas County once a week. Hi, my name is so-and-so. This is my wife, so-and-so. We're excited to be coming to the Largo area, the Seminole area, the St. Pete area. We're excited to see what God is going to do. And we're launching a church that is different, which really isn't. It's just the same as everyone else. Same premise, get people to come here. And, we were literally seeing a new church plant once a week. And they were coming from other states that were locking them down. So here in Florida, it wasn't as strict with the lockdown rules and the shutdown rules. So they were like, well, our show has been shut down over there in, say Minnesota or Illinois or wherever they're from, New Jersey, New York. So they would just boogie on over here and just launch a church, and you'd have all this marketing. They have a big budget for their marketing. Okay. And they, all this does really is it gets people to just boogie on over from other churches. Okay. They have programs that will help sustain their growth of this very impersonal way of getting people to join their church. And then maybe they'll get around to discipleship. Maybe they'll get around to outreach and missions. Okay. And what I like to say to people that have done this is, congratulations, Pastor. You created another Christian recycling center. Why are you so excited about that? That's literally what is happening here. You're just recycling Christians. They're already saved. They're not lost. They're found. You're recycling them. Okay. You should be doing both. You should be finding the lost and providing healing for the found at the same time. Okay. I love what Paul said. So relevant to what I'm talking about right now. Paul said this, Romans 15:20. And I so have made it my aim to preach the gospel, not where Christ was named, lest I should build on another man's foundation. What he's saying there is Paul would be like, look, I want to go where no one has gone before, kind of like Star Trek. I want to go and pioneer and preach. And their idea of pioneering in the book of Acts was discipleship. And I want to go somewhere where no Christian has gone before. Complete opposite, completely backwards to what we see today. Here's Pinellas County, one of the most saturated counties for churches. It is the most saturated county population-wise in the smallest geographic area. And literally every corner you turn on a main road, you'll see a church. You'll see a church building, that is. You don't see the church is the people. One of the points that I see that need to be addressed, okay? But again, when someone just launches a new church, they're really just building on another man's foundation. There have been people planting churches in this area for hundreds of years, 150, whatever, however old Pinellas County is. So again, I noticed different than what the first century apostles and the pioneers of the faith back then, how their attitude was very different. So let me talk about the incarnate church. So that's the attractional church. The premise is marketing. The main efforts is to get people to come. Here's an incarnate church. A biblically incarnate church looks something like this. Discipleship. Making disciples is the primary function. That is the purpose and vision of a biblical incarnate church. That is the going of the believer. Let me go and make disciples. Okay. They go where the lost are. By the way, I know a pastor in Volusia County that did this. Got a thriving church, and it started with him just going and meeting people on the streets and then having coffee with them, meeting at restaurants and discipling them. And there's a thriving church. I'll name it Greater Grace Chapel, Volusia County. Excellent church. Good pastor. There's a ministry in the Dominican Republic, Cienfuegos. Good friend of mine named Rudy. Basically started that ministry by sitting on tree stumps next to piles of garbage in Cienfuegos and teaching children how to read and write. And now there's a thriving mission out there called Abba's House. And so I know this can happen because I know people are going to look at it like, well, this just can't happen. It can. It's very hard here in the States, but it can happen. Okay. So biblically incarnate church, the Christian or Christians, you can have people of like mind go to where the lost are. They go to the laundromats. They go to restaurants. They go to the parking lots, and they interact with people, and they bring them the gospel, and they make those personal connections. And what that might look like is people are going to get baptized. People are going to receive the Lord. They're going to believe and put their faith in the Jesus of the Bible and respond to the biblical gospel, and they're going to get water baptized. Okay. And they will meet in a small group. whether it be, it could be any kind of, here's the thing, look, it could be a Facebook page. It could be a messenger group on Facebook Messenger. It could be a text strain, like where people are in a group text. It could be like that. It could be Zoom calls. It could be meeting at a coffee shop. It could be meeting at your job. If you have a 1 hour lunch break and get together with some people, go into wherever God has you, go with the idea of making disciples. And it might take months, it might take years, whatever the case may be. Okay. Next thing that you should see happen is if a group forms, then membership and mentorship and in-reach and outreach starts to happen, and gifts are discovered and developed. You might have someone, so let's just say your group that, you just seen immersion, God is building, and you guys as a group are like, we want to do a worship once a week at someone's house. You will have people that are gifted in worship. Maybe they've actually come from another church that they weren't happy with. Maybe they were invited. I mean, that could happen. There's room for both. But the primary function is going and making disciples. Okay? And you'll see gifts discovered and developed. Okay? Not appointed, not someone like, hey, why don't you, we're going to interview you. We're going to audition you. They're discovered and developed. Okay? And again, making disciples is the primary function. The membership should be active membership. That is healthy membership. If you have dry, stagnant, just someone showing up to his service and throwing some money in the basket once a week, they're not active. Those are people that I've experienced. My experience in the past have contacted me, and people like me asking to help them, mentor them through a tough situation. They don't go to their pastor because their pastor's too busy hiding in the green room somewhere to meet their needs as a good shepherd. So, next thing that we'll see, the community may grow. Because growth isn't the primary goal, it's optional. And if it doesn't grow, if like the Bible study that I'm a part of has been the same size for about a year and a half. Now, it may not have grown people-wise, but we have grown. The people that are attending the Bible study that I'm part of in the middle of the week, I have seen significant, tangible growth in some of the younger Christians that have become a part of it. And what's cool about it is most of us are missionaries. I've seen people go from never going on a mission trip to going on mission trips in our small group. We've got 10 or 15 of us that meet once a week, and we do a Bible study, and we share the preaching. We share the teaching. I spoke and taught yesterday, actually, and then sometimes my brother teaches, sometimes my niece teaches, sometimes my daughter, and we share. It's not just one person as the primary communicator. We teach each other. Okay. So as the group grows, primarily from people being invited, that's important. So you don't really have marketing going on. Small groups reemerge. And here's the cool thing about that. You may need a facility. Some groups, like what happened in the DR, facilities were needed. And God provided, and people here in the States donated money, and a medical clinic was built, a school was built, a kitchen was built, an outdoor kitchen was built, and there's more and more facilities being built out there in Cienfuegos. There's a church in Largo, I'll name it because it's good, Victory Fellowship. If I had more availability on Sundays, that's where I would be a part of them right now, because that particular church is at that church do discipleship. And when you go and visit their congregation, half those people are from the streets because they have a food bank, a fully functioning food bank. They have food outreach that happens every week. Okay, good church out there. And because of that, facilities were needed, and God met their needs. So sometimes facilities may be acquired by the community based on the needs of the functions of the outreach and in-reach. In-reach is important. That's meeting the needs within the community. Someone needs something fixed at their house. Someone needs maintenance done around their house. Somebody needs prayer. Somebody's in the hospital. Somebody passes away. That's in-reach. There should be in-reach and outreach happening at the same time. Now, it's important to note that leadership develops based on spiritual needs and practical needs. That's where we see the biblical model for elders and deacons, and they emerge and they are witnessed of, meaning that the gifts are recognized in a cell group leader that pioneers a cell group within this community. Somebody that's a worship leader, somebody that's helping with children. These ministers, these leaders that emerge, they emerge, and really what it is the witness of the leader being, raised up in a non-hierarchical way, but in a good way, in a biblical way. It's witnessed by mature eldership, deacons that are involved in like practical service, and the overall membership. And everyone, that's how I was ordained, by the way. When I was ordained, it was a culmination of what I felt on my heart, my spouse, of course, my kids, the community that I was working for at the time, and the bigger community that I was working for, which is Witnesses Now for Jesus. And there was basically high fives all around. And it took a year, by the way. I waited a year and I really searched and prayed about it. And I really was looking for anyone to say, hey, look, I don't think you should become a pastor, and here's why. And I was open to that. It wasn't just someone showing up and being like, I'm a pastor and I'm in charge. It wasn't someone that's already in charge just handpicking someone because of favoritism. That's not how that works. The leadership develops and emerges. It doesn't start with the leadership. Okay. Here's a contrast. American westernized models starts with the leadership, starts with the senior pastor, the founding, and then there's membership and then discipleship. Really, the biblical pattern we find in the book of Acts is this: there's discipleship, membership happens, and then leadership emerges based on the needs. Read Acts chapter 6, where there was a practical need, and they were like, hey, look, there's thousands of us now, and there are people that are being neglected because it's just not functioning. So they rose up deacons. They rose up deacons. They were of good reputation. Stephen was one of them. Okay. And what that is a good portion of a healthy Christian community. Okay. This is not about recycling Christians. This is about reaching the lost and healing for the found. So there's room for both. There are people that are going to want to come. I guess, I'll tell you a quick story, and then I'm going to close. I thought I was going to tell two, but I'm going to tell you another story, and then I'm going to close. In 2016, a good friend of mine and I started a Bible study. I was working at the jail and over there in Volusia, and I really, because of my nighttime schedule and working every other Sunday, I couldn't be a part of a local congregation at that point. So we just kind of started meeting together, just the two of us, and reading and just doing Bible studies. And then a friend of ours jumped on board, and there was three of us. And we said, you know what? This is really cool. Let's open up to our families, our wife and our kids. And we made a connection with a local pizza place and started meeting in their family gathering room. And within a year, because of word of mouth, there was about 15 to 20 of us showing up to this Bible study. We called it GOD, the Generations of Disciples. And the primary function of the Bible, I said this before in the previous episode, was discipleship, fellowship, and evangelism, because we didn't see that stuff happening in the local congregations around us. Okay. But one thing we noticed about this little group that formed is when needs arose, we met them as a community through prayer and practicality and addressed them. There was a young couple there that needed mentorship in their marriage, and we provided that. Okay. So there's a place for both. Okay. There's a place for both, because we had people coming from churches, and we were like, yeah, you're welcome. And I will tell you this, my friend that started that Bible study with me, he was told by the church that he was attending at first, if you continue to do your Bible study, we're kicking you out. And that's exactly what happened. Okay. Why does that, how is that even a thing within a local church? You know what? I would be excited. Actually, this happened at Cornerstone when I was pastoring at Cornerstone. My daughter started young adults ministry. We got like 7 young adults together, and she started a small group. Okay. And then when it started to just roll and continue, and they were meeting once a week, we then discussed it, and we're like, hey, let's see, how we can work with each other. So there was accountability there when requested. It wasn't like, hey, you got to stop that and you have to submit and it has to be approved by me no, it was like, that's really cool. I was excited about that. Okay. I was excited about that. We had a man start a ministry for senior citizens at a complex, at a senior citizen, and he just initiated it. And he goes, hey, I'm doing this. And we're like, hey, how can we work with you? And we helped empower him to do that. We actually put some money together and got him a PA system so we can have microphones. We didn't hog the glory. We didn't hog the spotlight. Okay. And that's something that I've seen in church plants that I tried to be a part of. I had to walk away from 2 of them. So with that, I'm going to close. Be encouraged, guys. Be incarnate, or be a part of something that's incarnate first. It's okay to have people coming and to let people know that you're there, but primarily the mission and the model should be incarnate and for the purpose of going and making disciples. So with that, guys, I'll see you next week. God bless.